Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we're at the big workbench today, taking a look at our plethora of framework parts. So over the last few weeks, I did have a little bit of a back injury. Because of that, I was not doing a lot of working in the warehouse, but I did get some work done on these frameworks and have some kind of cool things to share. And then today we're going to go through a little bit of troubleshooting, and I want to show you how I was able to fix one of the graphics cards that came in not so great shape. So ultimately, I was able to go ahead and build an entire Framework 16 in their overkill configuration. That includes a Ryzen 9 7940HS. It includes a AMD graphics card. You'll see that I have the expansion on the back here. This guy has currently 32 gigs of RAM. It has 4 terabytes of storage, and with that dedicated graphics card, it's actually kind of a beast. Just doing some very light gaming on it the other day. I have a gaming computer that I use more frequently than I should probably admit. But just trying this one out, it actually did a lot better than I would have expected out of a laptop. It's been a while since I've had a high performance laptop, so I didn't know really what to expect, but frankly, it did pretty well. When it comes to the Framework 16, one of the main reasons why I wanted one of these devices is because I wanted to be able to move my editing off of my MacBook Pro into a Windows-based machine. There's two main reasons for that. One, you may have seen a few videos back, I struggle a little bit when it comes to iCloud and to the MacBook's ecosystem. Everything around it, I'm sure works fantastic for some people, but if you're coming into it brand new, at least in the year of 2025, there's a lot to learn, and it's very easy to make mistakes and lose a lot of data. Because of that, I did lose pretty much an entire video's worth of information at one point, and frankly, just because of how locked down the system is, once I realized I lost that, there wasn't much I could do to try and get it back. I kind of like this DIY thing, if you can't tell based on everything you've seen on the channel so far. And even though Windows is much more locked down than some alternatives such as Linux, it still gives me the ability to do a little bit more and have a little bit more freedom with my information than what I could see on the MacBook. The other thing is that MacBook cost a lot of money. It cost more than what this framework and all of these parts together cost me. It also is very expensive to fix. The very first week that I had it out here in the warehouse, I was pulling some things off of the rafters and dropped a magnet, basically a fridge-size magnet, onto it, and freaked out because it dented the bezel of the screen, and I was just waiting for the screen to show a shatter. I was fortunate in that I didn't actually break the screen, but I knew that if I did, it was going to cost me upwards of $600 just to replace that one component, unless I wanted to lose functionality from the computer. Apple has these things locked down, and I understand why they do it, or at least why they claim to do it, but it doesn't really jive with what I like to be able to do with my computer. So even though the MacBook is faster when it comes to the editing that I've been doing compared to the framework, both in benchmarks and in day-to-day use, the framework gives me that peace of mind of knowing that I can bring it out here into the warehouse, and if I were to damage a piece, I can either replace it, or in some cases, I can actually go ahead and just fix it myself using things like 3D printing. And I'll show you some things that I got into on that a little bit later. Ultimately, I don't take this decision lightly because I am going to be taking a little bit more time with the framework, but with some of the newer generations that they're going to be bringing out, my expectation is that that time gap and the difference in performance that I'm seeing right now is going to continue to shrink. So again, I was pretty fortunate in this framework mystery box that I was able to get a whole computer, but what else did we get out of it? So ultimately, we ended up with, again, 6 total Framework 16 motherboards. 2 of these motherboards, at least at this time, are completely dead. They will not post, and they won't even give me error codes to tell me why they won't post. This could come down to a component missing on these boards. They are very, very intricate boards. There are thousands of components on these little boards. Because of that, I wouldn't even know where to start. And I don't believe Framework publishes the full schematics just because of the proprietary nature of some of their stuff in here, and because of the proprietary nature of what AMD has put into this. So there's really not a way for me to trace down and find out where I'm losing a voltage rail or things like that without a lot more experience. These might go into a maybe pile, and Perhaps someday, as I gain more experience, it's something that I can look into. I did end up with a total of 4 working main boards, but there is a caveat to that. So a couple of these main boards do function. They turn on, they'll work a screen, and they will work as a basic laptop. Now, one of them has USB ports that don't work on just one side. The other side, everything seems to work. It interfaced with the graphics card properly, gave me a display signal, and all of the components adding onto the laptop, like the keyboard, mouse, trackpad rather, all of that worked just fine. But one side is completely dead. That could be an easy fix. It could just simply be like a MOSFET or a capacitor that's gone bad. So I am going to hold that off to the side and maybe do some more testing on it as time permits. Another one of these will post and it will turn on and work great with only 1 stick of RAM in it. That's actually exactly the same issue that I currently have with my Framework 13. It only works with 1 stick of RAM, but for someone that's going to be good enough. And for me, for the 13-inch, that was absolutely fine. I want that thing to have better battery life anyway, and every stick of RAM you add to your system is additional wattage that has to be used to run that system. So 1 stick of RAM in there, perfectly fine. On a more heavy work-based computer, might not be, but this might be something that rather than try and fix, I simply just try and sell on somebody that may need a spare. The last one here, as far as I know, is in full working condition. So this board did boot with 2 sticks of RAM. All of the USB ports worked. I didn't have any driver errors within Windows, so it appears that this one is working. Fortunately for me, it's also the one with the best heat sinks. So this one, again, seems like it will be a good board for someone, or potentially for me to build another computer out of. Now, like I said, I did end up with 2 working graphics cards as well. Neither of them worked right out of the box. One of them, the one that came without any kind of a heatsink on it, just simply needed to be reassembled with an appropriate heatsink and with all of the other connectors and screws as well as the fans, and it turned on fine. So this one does have a little bit of damage on the actual connector here, which I'll show you in a pop-up right over here. But that damage seemed to be just superficial. I think what happened here is more than likely somebody had this graphics card, one of the fans went out or didn't work properly when they received it. So Framework said, hey, we're a DIY company, let's send you a new fan. And somewhere in the disassembly here, they ended up inadvertently scratching that board and said, hey, I don't know if this is going to work long term. I'd rather you guys just swap it out for me. So it does have a scratch across some of the traces here, but none of them are broken. And this one works just fine. I went ahead and repasted it using some PTM 7950, the phase change thermal interface here, just to make sure that it runs cool for the rest of its life. And this one's working just great. Now the second one is currently in the laptop here, but it did require a little bit of an extra repair. Fortunately, we got 3 of these in total. So what I was able to do is go ahead and take some components off of the back of this graphics card, the one that wouldn't post at all, and I was able to go ahead and take it off and replace one of the components on this board. We're actually going to take a look at that here in a second because I didn't do a great job on it. One of my tools kind of crapped out on me halfway through that repair. So while it works, I don't know how long it's going to work for, and I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I was able to go back in and get this done the proper way. So I've got one of those small components right here. I believe this is just one of the power phases. We're going to go over to the other bench and take a look and get this guy removed and get a new one installed in its place. Hopefully not bricking this graphics card at the same time. Now, before we go over to the other bench, I did also receive some additional parts. So out of our Framework 13 boards, I was able to get, again, one of them working at least part of the way. It works only with 1 stick of RAM, but again, for me, that's just fine. The other 2 boards that I received will not post at all, and they don't show any error codes. They go through the blink codes properly, and they end up coming back with no problems. I've tried to get into the firmware controller of these devices to see if there were any additional resets that I could do on them, and so far I've been unsuccessful. They seem to turn on, they get hot, and unfortunately they don't do anything else. More than likely, these are going to go in that pile of maybe one day when I've got a little bit better knowledge, I'll be able to get back into those. Now, as far as the additional parts that I got, so far what I found is out of the 6 keyboards that I've got, 5 of them have some flaw. So one of the buttons or one of the keys on these keyboards is not working. Fortunately, I got one fully working keyboard, and that's what I have installed in the Framework 16 right now. but all of these are essentially just going to be 4 parts keyboards. I've already disassembled one and tried to see if there was any way for me to fix the underlying components, but there really isn't. Framework knows this, and they've actually started with their 2nd gen keyboards, a system where the switches can be removed and replaced, and that allows you to really make sure that it's going to last you a really long time. I'll probably end up buying one of those when they become available. As far as the screens, so far I've actually only tested one. And that's because, again, they're really, really fragile. And once I got the first one working, I didn't want to even push my luck on the others or potentially take this one back in and out. My hope was that I was going to have some additional eDP or DisplayPort cables for these screens so that I could go ahead and test them out on these boards out of the box. But unfortunately, the Framework 13 DisplayPort cables don't work on the Framework 16. And because I only have the one, I'm a little worried about potentially damaging it because these are extremely fragile. So that leaves me with a box of 3 screens, a bunch of keyboards that don't work, some components that don't work, and a few that could build an entire system out. So what am I going to do with these parts? At this point, my idea was to go ahead and just get some better troubleshooting done on some of these boards to see if there's anything out of them that's salvageable. I want to go ahead and get the ones that are working fully tested so that I can properly represent them. And then more than likely, I'll end up putting them up on my shop. I'll see if they sell there. If not, maybe after some time, I'll throw them up on eBay where I get a little bit of a wider audience. But I want to give you guys a crack at them first, just in case this is something that you're interested in pursuing yourself and maybe just need that 1 or 2 components. The extra graphics card, again, this guy is working great. Even on their clearance sale right now, these are $400, so I expect I can probably get a couple $100 out of this spare one that I have. Although I may just hold on to it as a spare since the one inside of the laptop right now does have a little bit of a bodge repair and may not end up lasting this next surgery. Other than that, I did buy some additional parts and I've got almost everything necessary to build another Framework 16. I need about another $500 worth of parts to do that. So I've considered going back to them, buying some additional parts and just selling a computer as a whole. But honestly, I just don't know if it's worth it, considering they're bringing out their new processors and everything within the next month. And you're going to see, and I'm expecting to see a lot of these hit the market pretty soon as people upgrade to the newer generation of processors. So with that, let's go ahead and get over to the other bench. We're going to take a look at some of that troubleshooting that I did, get some components off of this graphics card to put into the working graphics card, and with any luck, still have a working computer at the end of it. All right, everyone, back to the workbench. I promise we're not getting into recreational drugs, at least not in this video. So the component that caused the consternation on the previous graphics card was one of these guys right here. And this guy is tiny. This is an SMD component, meaning a surface mount device. And I'll bring it up to our side cam here just so you can really kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. So this little guy is an inductor that's part of the VRMs or the voltage regulation in the graphics card. And whenever I pulled this one apart completely to verify what was going on with it, one of them had not exploded, but it had obviously gotten very hot to the point where part of the chip had melted. So it kind of was my smoking gun to say as far as what was wrong with this device. Now I went ahead and pulled a few extras off. I got a new hot air rework station, which works awesome, and actually was able to get these off without burning the board. So I was able to go ahead and pull some additional ones off. But what we're going to be looking to do today is go ahead and pull the graphics card out of this device. We need to then disassemble it down a little bit. And then I'm going to be replacing, which it'll be pretty obvious which one I changed in here. We'll be replacing that one bad chip. So to get into the Framework 16, you tackle it a little different than most other laptops. With the Framework 13, you go in from the bottom, but with the 16, everything's done right up here from the top. Now, I alluded to earlier being able to really kind of fix and repair this device on my own. One of the complaints that I saw about the Framework 16 was that these panels that are normally to the side, either side of the trackpad, if you're a hairier person like myself, you can end up getting hair caught inside of them. I found though that somebody has already solved that problem with a 3D printable part, and that's what this is here, which is simply a gap filler specifically made for the Framework 16. And it fits in any of the places where the normal modules would, as long as you're taking up 2 modules. So I could put it all the way over here if I wanted to and snap it in. And this is solid. I mean, it's worked really well over the last couple of weeks for me without any trouble whatsoever. It printed nicely. in my opinion, it doesn't look half bad. So I'm keeping this one on. I got the aluminum plates to go in here, but they don't really fit together 100% right. They're frankly a little jankier than what I would expect out of a $2,600 computer. So this is going to work just fine for me. But getting in here, we take apart the top. We then have two little pull tabs on the keyboard and one pull tab over here on the keypad. All right, so once we get the trackpad and everything out of there, we don't actually need to disassemble it any further as far as the main plate here to get to the graphics card. We would only need to disassemble it further if we needed to get into the SSDs, the Wi-Fi module, the RAM, anything like that would require that additional disassembly. For now though, to get to the graphics module, there's only two things we need to do. We first need to remove this interposer, which is actually the link between the graphics module and the main board itself. This is a required component. It sends power and the data over from one side to the other. And that's why they put it under this little flap here, because they want to make sure, because this isn't a hot swappable system, they want to make sure, because this isn't a hot swappable system, meaning that you cannot take it in and out while the computer is running, they wanted to make sure that if you were to even open up the flap here, the computer's going to complain to you. So in this case, if you open that flap, it should cut power to the computer and really not allow you to go any further on the disassembly so that you don't cause any damage. Now, once you remove that interposer, the only other thing you need is these two screws here, which are captive screws. I found out that the screws in the Framework 16 that are gold colored are not captive, but everything else is considered a captive screw. So that means that these are not going to come out, even though they're completely unscrewed. They are still stuck in the actual chassis itself. Now, those are what hold the graphics module in. So from here, all we need to do is pull, and this just comes right out. It's on some rails there. And we now have access to the graphics module. I'm going to go ahead and set the laptop down and off to the side so I don't accidentally kick it here. So now we do need to do some additional disassembly to get to the component that is damaged on the other underside here. Because of how this is set up, we need to remove not only the heatsink, but also the fans to be able to get this out. Now, the first part that comes out though is going to be this black plastic trim here. And we do so by taking out some of these gold screws, which again are the ones that are not captive. So I've got to go ahead and set these off to the side so I don't misplace them. Now, other than a graphics card, you can actually fit another module in this back bay here. Currently, Framework only has two modules available. The graphics card, which currently the 7700S is the only module available. They have a new graphics card coming out, but it's just not out yet. The other module is an NVMe slot, which allows you to actually put two additional NVMe drives into the computer. It already has two available from factory, so adding the additional two really just gives you a ton of space to work with. Now I'm flipping up the pins here on the cabling for the fans, just so I don't forget it later on. And I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out of the fans here. Which they don't actually come out, they are captive, you'll notice, because they are not gold. But I'm going to go ahead and just simply loosen them, and then we should be able to get the heatsink and the entire graphics module out without fully removing them. I lifted those just to make sure that if we do move them too far, they don't end up straining the connector or potentially breaking the connector, because that's not a job I want to do today. All right, now that I've got that out, there's 4 additional screws that I need to take out. There's going to be 3 here that are not captive and 1 captive screw that I need to unscrew. So we'll take our 3 gold ones out. We've got 1 right up front here, and these are all luckily the same screw, so I don't have to really keep them separate. And then we have 2 right back here next to the DisplayPort output. Now, one of my subscribers mentioned on the last video that there was some confusion based on what Framework has on their website. And I'll be honest, they don't lay things out 100% clearly in some cases. I really think that's something that they could work on. If you guys need a technical writer, hit me up. But currently on the Framework website, it says that the only module that is able to charge via a USB-C port on the back here is the NVIDIA graphics chips, which haven't come out yet. This module also has that port on the back, but it's only for display output. It's not actually going to allow you to charge the device. So that's where some of the confusion came from when somebody said, hey, it looks like you got one of the newer graphics cards. And unfortunately, that's just not something that happens when it comes to these mystery box deals. That'd be cool. I'd love it, but yeah, not something that they do currently. They're not giving us new parts. All right, I'm just going to shift these out of the way ever so slightly, and I actually left this screw in just a little. There we go. We'll shift that out of the way. And then I can go ahead and just find a place on here I can grab and pull this entire module out. Now I'm going to shift the fans up here and just move them out of the way because we don't need that part now. Now you may already be able to see some of my carnage. In fact, I'll bring it down here. On this board, I did leave a good amount of flux still behind, so you can see some like on this component here. That's just because I was really wanting to just throw it back in the computer and test it. And I tested it and it worked, which I wasn't expecting. And then I just kind of kept it in there for a few days because I wanted to test it over time and make sure it wasn't going to fail. And so far I've rendered an entire video off of this without any trouble, played a little bit of gaming off of it without, again, any trouble, and done some benchmarks, and it came up just fine. Now that I've got that shield off, and that's just simply an EF shield, and it does, I assume, probably take some of the heat away from some of these components. You'll notice this guy right here. It's not only a little cattywampus on the board itself, I'll show you on the close-up, but it is also covered in flux and just doesn't look too hot. So my old soldering, or hot air station rather, some people swear by those really, really cheap ones. Mine worked okay, or at least I thought it was working okay, but really struggled with getting these chips off. And that was even with all of the heatsink and everything taken off, which I'm about to do here. Ultimately, it was able to get them off, but I had to keep the heat on the board for so long that it heated up really all the components and made me uncomfortable to the point where I didn't want to attempt to reflow it and make it look pretty. I've since gotten a new forced air heat gun that I'm going to show you here in just a second, and that one does seem to be working quite well, and it got the other components off the other board much more easily, kind of the loaner or donor board there. So I'm hoping that I can clean this up and make it look nice. So you'll see here, this one, because I wasn't throwing it back together permanently, I did just use some regular thermal paste. I'll probably do that again today, and then at some point in the future, maybe come back in here and add in the proper PTM 7950 to make sure it stays cool. Now my goal today is to go ahead and take that component back off, which should be a much simpler venture than what I had to deal with before. And then I want to go ahead and put a new one back on from the other board. Now to do that, I need something to protect my workspace. So I am going to go ahead and grab what I've been using, which is the screen off of a Framework 13. And this is a broken screen, don't worry, I'm obviously not using a new one. This one was completely shattered. In fact, I think I can turn it over and show you here. You might not be able to actually see it, but it's actually like bendy. Oh, and there, I just shattered it even further. But yeah, it's not a good screen. This one is definitely bad. If anything, maybe I could pull the brackets off here, but I have so many of them, I don't need it. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get some heat on this guy, and we're going to take that component off very gently because I don't want to disturb any of the components around it. And then we're going to replace it with one of our other components, hopefully making it look a lot better in the process. I'm also going to do some cleanup on this board and hopefully get some of that flux off of there so that if I do ever sell this on in the future, it's nice and clean. All right, so I've got my inductor here and I want to make sure that I'm putting it on the same way that it came off. I don't know that that matters for this type of component, but I am going to line it up because it has a mark on there. So that's right, and we'll be able to pull it up just like that. Let me make sure. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I had that off. These aren't all on the same way, which leads me to believe it may not be necessary, but I don't want to chance it. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer, guys. I don't know 100% what I'm talking about when it comes to this kind of stuff. I just know if something works, it works, and so far, this has worked. All right, so I'm going to be running at 380 degrees Celsius to get this guy off and get enough heat in the board. Then we're going to apply some of our recreational drugs here, which is actually just some solder paste. If you don't know what solder paste is, it's basically just really tiny beads of solder that are suspended inside of a type of flux. So you can paste it or put it onto a board where you need that contact, and then you can heat it up with a hot air station to get it to flow properly. Now, in some cases, you can go ahead and shield the components around the component you're working on. Usually you use something like Kapton tape for that. I'm not doing that only because, one, I find that the kind of smell and chemical that the Kapton tape puts off just isn't appealing. And two, I find that I sometimes have issues where components will stay stuck to the tape, or maybe the tape will lift up and take a component with it as I'm doing this. So I'm not going to do that. Your mileage may vary. But we're going to go ahead and take our gun out, which we'll get it started up here. And we're already almost up to temperature. Let me move this guy out of the way. All right, so what I'm doing here is coming in with my hot air, and I'm just simply applying it. This is where we might start to have trouble hearing, but I'm simply applying it to this chip right above it. I really shouldn't go at an angle. I should go straight up and down here just to make sure that I'm not blowing items out of the way. I'm actually going to reduce my air speed there as well. I've got it at half. I'm going to reduce it down to about 40%. All right, so there we go. And you can kind of see, hopefully on the camera here, how it's already started turning liquid, and that's the flux around this chip that I had. Flux just helps to carry the solder to where you need it to go. It kind of works as a liquid to bridge the gap between the solder and the pads and help to move it around. We're starting to get somewhere. I can see that flux really moving now, and there we go. I was able to get the chip off. All right, now what I want to do from here is go ahead and clean this up, and I'm going to use my actual soldering iron for that. All right, so I've got my soldering iron, bringing it in here. It's working quite well here. I want to give myself a pretty clean area to work with. That's going to make sure that that component doesn't sit all up and wonky again. Got it relatively clean there. Don't worry about the rest of the board. There's still flux everywhere, unfortunately. I, again, made a little bit of a mess of this. But you can see the two pads right here are what we're working with. And we're about to take this component right here and put it in between those two pads. Now, how are we going to do that? So again, we're going to go ahead and grab our syringe here, and we're simply going to put a small dab on each of these pads. Again, these are really, really tiny components, and there we go. So not a whole lot on there. And now what I'm going to do is take my tweezers, grab that component, and just simply set it right on top of where I just put that solder. And I'm going to go ahead and push it all the way down to the board. As soon as I heat that part and get it above the melting point of this solder, which is 183 degrees Celsius, so it's actually a pretty low melt solder, then that should solidify it and turn into a joint and basically clean itself up for me. All right, and I would say that that did it. Unfortunately, I think I had to pull it out from your view there, but you can still see, but you should be able to see right here, that one that I worked on looks a little bit different than the others, but it's now much more uniform overall than what we were looking at before. It also looks like I didn't knock any of the other components off here, so that's great news. And it appears that I got it on the right way. So again, pretty good news there, and I'm not seeing any, yeah, there's still some of that flux hanging around, but I'm not seeing any bridges or anything like that between any of the components that are right next to this guy. So I think that that was a successful surgery, and we're going to find out here in a moment whenever I pop it back into the computer. We'll go into our task manager, and under performance, we should see two graphics cards, and we do in fact. So we've got the Radeon 7800M, which is the inbuilt graphics card on the main board, and then we have the 7700S, which is that external or dedicated graphics card.
All right, so should be pretty obvious at this point, but which one of these am I going to end up keeping? Actually, trick question. Not going to end up keeping either of them. So when I first got the idea to get a powerful laptop, the main point was so that I could do everything for the channel out of the warehouse. I wanted to be able to do all of my editing, my script writing, everything all in one location. Kind of keep work and home separate type thing. Ultimately, there was an issue with that though. As you all have seen, the warehouse can get really, really hot, and I really don't have a way at this point to cool it efficiently. And because of that, both the MacBook and the framework were kind of overheating as I was using them. So my performance wasn't great when I was out at the warehouse compared to when I was doing editing here at home. And also it required that I work, because of working off a laptop, it required in a lot of cases that I work with multiple external drives, moving data back and forth, and a lot of these files are very, very large sizes, meant that I was a little bit more restricted in how much I could work on at one time. I might have to work on just one video because that's all my external drive could hold, so I was offloading things at home and then bringing what I thought I needed for the day out to the warehouse. That didn't really work great. And because I had already switched to the framework, to Windows for my editing, I decided to give my gaming computer a go and found that it was way, way faster than either of these. And that's to be expected. It's much more powerful and uses a lot more electricity as well. But ultimately, that means that these laptops at this point are more of a want than a need. And frankly, I could use the money for other projects around the channel. So my plan at this point is to sell both of those laptops, go ahead and put the money back into the channel best I can. I'm going to continue to keep my Framework 13 because it is a great device. So I am ultimately going to keep the Framework 13 so that I still have something portable. It is a great computer, both from battery life to just capability and performance. So overall, that's going to be kind of my daily driver. And if I need to use a computer while I'm out of the warehouse, that'll be it. But my editing rig's just going to have to be my home computer from now on. It is working out better. I've got more storage space and I've got direct access to my NAS so I can move files over to them. And hopefully going to upgrade to 10 gigabit networking soon to make that process faster as well. Now, speaking of frameworks, as of the posting of this video, you guys should still have a couple of hours to go and get your entries in for the framework giveaway. That's going to end at midnight tonight, the 17th of November, and that's midnight Eastern time. It's all based on my time zone, so just know you've only got until that time. My folks on the West Coast. I am planning on doing a live stream for that. I haven't scheduled it quite yet because, as you may be able to hear, still a little under the weather, and I want to make sure that I'm nice and clear and ready to go when it comes to live stream time. So that will be sometime later this week. I will again put a post up about it, and then of course you'll see it if you're subscribed in your video feed. You don't have to be present to win. If we pick a name on the live stream and that person doesn't get back to me after a certain amount of time, I would have to refer back to the rules to see how much time they have. But if they don't get back to me within a certain amount of time, then we'll go ahead and repick. Probably won't do a live stream for the second one, but I'll post about it on the channel. Yeah, that's about it for now, guys. If you like the framework content, go ahead and give a like and a subscribe. That tells me this is something I should continue to pursue. Otherwise, we've got some more battery content coming up pretty soon as I can get rid of this. And yeah, hopefully you all stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.